Hi, everyone, and welcome to Nightcap. In this show, we ask creators about themselves, their games, and what influenced the game's journey. Tonight's episode is sponsored by DreamWizards Games and Dr. Finn Games. If you'd like to sponsor a future show, let us know. We'd love to have you. We are speaking with Christopher Ryan Chan, Chris McMahon, and Ross Saunders.
Hi, I'm not Chris.
And together they're designers of The Night Cage, published by Smirk and Dagger Games. I'm tonight's host, Will Jipson, and I'm joined by Sam Perez. Speaking of Ross, we took a look at your professional website.
Oh no!
You realize it's a stock photo.
I did, yeah.
You look very different from what we saw, which is fun. I like surprises.
I mean, you have me on video here, so I feel like you never made that decision. Like people like interviewers not know what's coming.
Well, we're all our own worst critic, I suppose. Okay. Well, let's get into it. You awaken in the dark. Your skin cold. Your mind blank. You have nothing but your fear, a flickering candle, and a question. How long will your light last? So that describes my quarantine experience. Let's get on with the game. The Night Cage is a cooperative game for 1 to 5 players. It was 1 to 4, but we've unlocked a stretch goal that allows a 5th player. Is that right?
Correct.
Yep.
Ages 14 plus and estimated 50-minute playtime. So one of the stretch goals wasn't a change in the age range for players, just the number of players.
We did some math to figure out how much it would cost, and we just didn't think it was attainable.
Yeah, getting those 13-year-olds is expensive.
Did you play test this with like a child psychologist to get an idea of the cutoff age? I always wondered how that's determined.
Children, and our experience was that actually even pretty, like 8 or 9, grasp the game pretty well. But we also make sure that no one goes home with nightmares that they're not ready to handle. So
we just play tested it with my kids, and once they stopped having night terrors, we figured that was a good age cutoff.
When did you go back in time from the future? I mean, aren't your kids like at oldest 6?
I don't mean the official age cutoff. I'm saying like 7, where she plays it now, and it's fine.
I will say though, for the age range is nice though, because we don't. It's a horror themed game, but there's no like gore, there's no violence, there's nothing that would be truly objectionable thematically. It's dark and kind of mature, but nothing about it would be like I couldn't show this to my 8 or 9-year-old. Like there's nothing about it that you visually would be like, oh, I wouldn't want them to see. We're very cautious about trying to make sure that it felt kind of like existential horror rather than trying to be like shock or gore or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think right now the sort of market for like really gory, like just near face splatter horror in board games is pretty well that niche is filled. So this game wanted to be something that was a little bit quieter and a little bit more unsettling in the way that it played.
All right, if you want to give us, if you want to give us just like the 30-second elevator pitch, general description of how it plays out.
Sure. So it is a cooperative tile placement game. The objective is to find keys and escape from a gate as a collective unit, but the catch is that you can only see the tiles that are directly around where you are in the maze. So as you travel, you get to draw new tiles, but everything that you had revealed previously, rather than sticking around like it might in another kind of maze game, is now taken off the board. So if you go back to where you came, all that stuff is gone, and you're going to draw all new tiles. And then what you left behind, that time will also go away, so you're constantly making and unmaking the maze with your candlelight as you try and explore.
Nice.
Oh, and monsters.
Of course.
Monsters.
If the doors are disappearing behind you, there's gotta at least be monsters. So what was the first kind of like moment, like I guess either the first thought, the first conversation that was the seeds of this game? What was the spark that became the Night Cage?
So we are all advertising people, and this is relevant because one of the things that advertising people do sometimes is we go out for lunch for a very long time. We're not avoiding work or anything like that. We just have ideas, and we're talking about things. And sometimes the Night Cage comes out of that. But in all seriousness, we went out to lunch one day, and we were just talking about board games, and like I can't remember, one of us just said, well, what if we had like a game that like where everything that you saw disappeared after you saw it, and that kind of sparked everything.
Yeah, it was this kind of thing. I think it just stuck with all of us, and we just kept casually talking about it, over the next couple of weeks. And at a certain point, we were like, maybe we should just like make it, because that's pretty easy to actually do.
In fairness, usually how this works is that Chris will decide to make something, and then it'll be there, and then it basically literally he like put together the most rough prototype that you could imagine. We had it printed from Print and Play Ad Magic, and then like we had it, and we were playing it. We're like, is this good? Did we make it good?
The answer was no, but it was interesting, and then we got it to it.
So when did you realize that this was going to be a horror game? Like when you first started testing this idea, was it like, oh, this is terrifying, or like did it go through different phases of like what this makes you feel like? Like when did you realize it was a horror game?
I think we hit the theme like really early, because we did technically have the mechanic first, but we, again, like as artists and writers, we're all in creative field stuff. Like we were very. I think it was really important to us to kind of make sense, and all of the pieces held together. There wasn't just this kind of abstract thing. And so I think we landed on the theme pretty quick, and that sort of, just by its very nature, kind of led you in that direction. But I think that it was never intended to really be, I think, as was said earlier, like this, gory traditional horror thing, right? I think we talked about it, and we decided pretty quickly, like, board games are never going to be good at like jump scares and like doing kind of like freaking you out that way. But what we could do is make you really, really anxious, and that's its own type of fear. And I think that that's where we sort of, anybody that's been married knows that. We sort of just tried to go down that direction. And I guess we're doing all right. I don't know.
I
like
think
it's working.
I think you're discounting a little game called Don't Wake Daddy. If you don't think jump scares are
That
possible.
shit will scare the crap out of you.
He's got a point.
I also
at operations that list.
Yep, I thought about Operation, and also a Chickaboom. There's a very old VHS tape of me as a child crying because I got scared of Chickaboom, and so
the one where you push down the alligator's teeth.
yeah.
Gosh, there's a rich well of child horror games.
Long history.
All right, I think we
All right, okay.
Why do they
So
get the
we-
jump scares? You don't.
I think we've planted some sequel ideas, but
I think if we were to do that for adults, people would have to actually be risking losing their fingers, and that's probably not a very sustainable business model. It's a little bit too legacy.
I like it. So
And my Don't Wake Daddy legacy concept is tied up in legal red tape, so I don't think that's ever come to light.
So, when you guys were playtesting this and you were kind of making mechanical decisions and tweaking things, did you have kind of like a guiding rule for like when interesting like puzzle mechanics won versus theme balance won? Because like there's lots of ways to make it feel more like groping around in the dark, feeling scared and miserable, but also make the game like not possible to beat. So like knowing that there's only 2 key tiles left is not really part of like the terrifying theme, but it also makes it a playable, like functional game. Like, was that hard to balance? And like, were there conversations around like when to give and take on either of those?
That's a really interesting question. And sorry.
I mean, I don't know about what you guys think, but I think for me, I had kind of a turning point with that when we went to Unpub in 2018, right? Was it 2018 or was it 2019? I'm losing my mind. I think it was 2019.
I was lost all meetings to make that.
Yeah, time doesn't exist anymore.
And I think in that moment at least I'd been thinking about it a lot as how do we sort of use these mechanics to really like, tell this story. And after we like did a bunch of testing there, I think for me it became very important that it also was a knowable, like playable game that had other elements to it besides its story. But I've been leaning really hard on the story part up until that point.
I think we've always tried to combine the story, like the theme, because like I think, and Ross had a lot to say on this, so I'll let him do his tirade in a moment. But this is a game that has a theme, but it's also thematic, and that it has like literary themes to it. And we've always kind of had that in mind as we've worked through it. I would say I think that everything we've done is always kind of tried to do both, at least as far as I'm able to kind of keep track of our kind of process through it. But I think the biggest thing is that we all being professional creatives, where our usual process is like write down 100 things and then 2 of them won't suck, and then you try and figure out what to do with those 2 things. So for us, we had lots of ideas where it's like, oh, this is really fun, but it doesn't make any sense. Or like, oh, this is really terrifying, but it's not fun at all to play. So the idea of just being able to being very deliberate about those things and say like, well, this just doesn't work fundamentally, throw it out, go to the next idea, was kind of baked into a process from the beginning because it's just how we operate in our day jobs anyway.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I think that our process, you'll hear like people talk about designers having kind of 2 broad buckets of process they fit into, right? Like the people that kind of start with the game does everything, and then they whittle stuff away. And I think that we kind of have come at it from the other way, right? Where we had a very simple thing, and we just kind of slowly layered stuff on top of it, But anytime a layer felt like too many, we peel it back off. We've been really draconian about making sure that every piece that we add to this puts more in than it asks of the players. We don't want it to be this thing that has like heavy cognitive load like that. And then I think also, going back to the core question, because that wasn't what the original question was, I think we made some decisions early on that played into this kind of idea too of balancing the needs of, abstracting out a game experience while still kind of pushing people towards that feeling. Like in the early version of the game, we had like dead ends and stuff, and we got rid of those, but we're like, but then you have the monsters create dead ends. How do we keep it so it's this maze where like you can always go somewhere, and at the same time, there always could be a problem around every corner, right? Because that's sort of what furthers that anxiety. That's how we came to the pits and the pit jumping, which is a really important thing. Thematically it feels like, oh, it's this thing I don't want to do, and it does have costs and risks to it, but it also makes sure that literally you cannot get trapped in this maze.
Right.
There's always somewhere you can go, always some way you can get out, even if you don't like it. And I think that keeps in order to keep the pressure on the anxiety up but keep it fun, you have to have just the tiniest little like pressure valve that lets it go. It still like keeps you kind of ratcheted up.
Yeah, and that's a unique, fairly rare design principle, because it saves you from that awkward discussion with the publisher, which I'm sure 9 out of 10 designers have, which is you need to cut down. Like, you don't need a timer, a mini, and a deck of cards, and you don't need all of these.
Yeah.
You don't. It is fairly rare to hear about a game that is built by adding play, as opposed to cutting. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to.
And again, we're very fortunate finding a core mechanic. This idea of a tile, this solipsistic maze that only exists when you're looking at it, was so core so early that like we didn't feel like we had to do like a ton of additional pieces to that. Yeah, like
we didn't have to look for the hook. We
Right.
just luckily just kind of landed on the hook, and we were like, ouch, that hurts, but that's a really good hook, let's use that.
And so with your background in because this process can be very painful of getting a game to market. Is this the first game for all of you to be published?
Yep.
And do you think that your professional backgrounds do you think that that kind of eased a lot of those possible pains that could happen of a first time experience?
Definitely.
I think
we already had some really useful skill sets, and then on top of that, like we don't have feelings anymore. those have all been beaten out of us by our creative directors. So
Yeah.
What are you talking about, Ross? I didn't have them going in.
Yeah,
okay,
I'm not kidding about like
well,
writing like 100 things down, getting 2 out of that. Like we're just used to the idea that like it's not going to work, and also being collaborative. We're actually kind of fortunate that our publisher Kurt also from like a marketing and advertising background. So the idea of doing creative collaboratively was something that we all kind of came in with that skill set of like how do you advocate for ideas without being pushy? How do you help improve an idea that other people have rather than trying to like make it about like trying to add to it or beat that idea rather than trying to describe what's wrong with it. That's not a solving process. We're kind of coming from it like, oh, that's interesting, but it doesn't do this. But what if it did this? And then you have this kind of energy that goes from it. Kurt's really collaborative from that perspective.
And it keeps the energy moving forward. Nobody's upset if a particular idea didn't catch, if their own suggestion didn't.
I mean, I don't think it's that you're never set because everyone
Or
has
you know how to
feelings.
handle it.
Yeah,
You
it's
handle
more-
it no more.
It's more that you understand that you're being pissy and that's probably you being pissy versus it being a bad idea.
yeah. And then we give each other our moment, and then we make fun of that person when they crawl back,
Pretty much.
and then it's fine.
So speaking,
We all get it.
I'll have to say one thing too. I think to this day, Ross, you pointed out we've never voted for anything. Like we never do like a 3-way. Well, to break a tie, we always try and figure out a better version of the idea that all 3 of us get excited about, and that's way harder. It's way harder, but it's been way better for the process.
was there a particular decision that took a longer time than the others to get all 3 consensus on?
Yes.
An
Yes,
example.
there was. I have a specific example. The board size. I've been fighting to make the book smaller since I think probably middle of last year, and we did it finally because we realized what some of the issues were with some of the ways that players interacted and where some of the core tensions of the game. But it's one of those things that though I was ultimately proven right. I was also proven wrong on many occasions on that point. Because
That's right. No 5x5 grid, Chris. I'll die on that hill.
No, that probably won't work. I'll admit that probably won't work. I will admit the 5x5 is probably a bad idea. But it's one of those things where, as they were saying, we haven't ever voted on something because when we run into a problem like that, where one of us is really stuck on a thing, it's an indication that there's probably something that bigger at play than that one thing. So we work through that and we try to figure out where the problem is, and maybe it ends up being that one person or 2 people right about one thing, and maybe we were all just wrong and we get the wrong thing anyway, and that's more important because that's it's because it's not about being right, it's about making the game better.
I would
Yeah,
say
and I feel like often we just end up, a lot of the things we get stuck on, we end up abandoning. It's not even somebody wins or someone loses. That thing just goes away and it ends up getting replaced by some different thing.
I would say if you have a process that you can put to paper, you guys could run panels
At my job.
conventions at your job and game design project management.
That'd be kind of interesting. I would say that I think that 3 co-designers is a rarity.
Yeah.
We all happen to already be coworkers and friends to begin with, and we all have the idea together, and we're all excited to work, and we're all equally excited to work on it together. And it's very rare to find all 3 of equal levels of interest and skill to be able to bring to that process to keep with it. So I can't say that 3 people is a good solution for every board game designing process.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't, we all have other ideas too that, maybe we'll work on them after this together, maybe we won't. We will, of course, help each other develop our ideas, but, this is a pretty unique moment for Night Cage.
Yeah. Because Chris designs a new board game every 6 to 8 weeks. I couldn't help him develop all of those if I try. I have no idea where he finds the energy for it.
Well, one thing I was curious about too, and you mentioned your publisher also being from a marketing kind of background. So I was curious how the decision came about, because I know Smirk and Dagger has two kind of labels. They have the Smirk and Dagger, and they have Smirk and Laughter. And Night Cage ended up on the Smirk and Laughter label, if I was reading things correctly. And
actually, it is both.
Oh, it's both. Okay.
It is neither.
Okay. Because I saw it on the Laughter website, and I was curious how it came about to decide that it was less like Nevermore and more like Not So Fast. But okay, that makes sense.
This has been a consistent point of confusion.
Yeah. He didn't want to put it on Smirk and Dagger, understandably, because it's cooperative and it doesn't have you can't take that element in a cooperative game. But then thematically, it seems like it's a better fit over there than with Smirk and Laughter. And so he decided to end up kind of doing like a co-imprint solution for the box. So we'll actually have both imprints for the box.
So are these
Night Cage or the Smirkiverse?
Yes. We finally combined the Smirkiverse.
Does he treat these as discrete companies? Are they, or is it like record labels where it's like this might go better on my jazz label?
It's more like labels.
Yeah, it's like DC and Vertigo. It's like all the money ends up in the same mattress. It's just, how it gets there.
Gotcha. Okay. One thing I want to point out, I did want to pick up. I wanted to make a personal comment on the art because I did really like the art. I did. It's very, and that's Chris Chan. That is all you.
He's
all that
on my screen, but that's
taught him everything he knows.
You taught him.
I can't even trust.
And you guys said that this sort of came epiphenomenally. The mechanics and the art and theme kind of came together. Is that right?
Well, the sort of spirit of the art was there, but the art is sort of a separate conversation because it turns out that if you try to do art and game design at the same time, you can't. It doesn't work. They kind of have to be parallel conversations, but they can't be the same conversation. And you can look in the game design for opportunities for art, and if you are an artist, or if you have somebody who can do that sort of thing, they can do that and look for opportunities for beauty and all that other stuff. But we went through a bunch of different looks, looking for it. Like the things that were consistent were that it was black and white, and the game still maintains a very black and white stark feel, even though it had color pops now. But a lot of it was like, how do we want this world to feel? And as that sort of evolved, the art addressed that too. Like I have an entire tile set or two that we just ended up not using because it didn't evoke the same stuff that we were looking for.
I found it very appropriate. I tend to feel like with these sort of endeavors, with themes especially, there tend to be well-trodden paths that just get dug deeper and deeper. And anything like this that can eschew expected, like a dark theme or a horror game. Like I feel like this art, it's very primal and Jungian. It's like a Jungian take on fear, and very much less is more. And I really appreciated that. That didn't it didn't draw on what I mean. We horror games tend to follow like one or two different things artistically and thematically, and I always appreciate something that does something a little different.
And was it fun to kind of branch out and do this kind of artwork compared to, I guess, your day job artwork? Because I imagine you don't get requests from clients a whole lot for TV commercials that are primal Jungian takes on fear. So this was a fun side project.
You haven't seen Dunkin' Donuts rebrand.
It's very spooky. I tried so hard. We're working on some Halloween stuff for them, and I tried so hard to get them to just like spell spooky with a bunch of donuts, and they wouldn't. So anyway, I don't know. Maybe you need to bleep all of that. I'm pretty sure it's fine though.
Well, we'll review our game later. Actually, I will say the art was pretty experimental early on. We had some really early stuff that was kind of wild and did a lot of stuff with experimentation. We had a really interesting thing early we abandoned because we assumed we would never have any kind of resources to do acrylic tiles are so luxurious, which has now been proven false by incredible amounts of demand from our fans. Thank you to everyone who demanded to push this up. But one of our very, very early prototypes, because the board was black, I think we actually at this point had a fabric board.
Yes.
And we had done clear acrylic laser cut tiles so that you would get the effect of the black refracting through the laser cuts, and that would show you where the pathways were when you put down the clear tiles onto the mat. It sounds really cool. It looks kind of neat. It was really not useful for playing a board game, but it's a cool idea in principle that doesn't quite bear out.
It wouldn't work with the current game at all because the tiles need to be double-sided in a way that wouldn't have allowed.
Yes.
But if this was a non-double-sided game, I still think that would be amazing. It also would be enormously difficult to illustrate because, at least in the current style, because this style does not like being vector. Turns out anything that has a stippled look, don't try to do that in vector. That's a bad idea.
Noted.
Yeah. I was at the time when at the very beginning of this, the first look for this game was it was all about how could I laser cut this thing, because I'd just gotten this membership over at a hackerspace in Brooklyn that I'm still kind of obsessed with.
The best reason to pick an art style.
And I was trying to communicate this sense of fear and topography by just having lines that would sort of be they would tell you where the path was, and then they'd get this sort of weird wavy geography, and it was very abstract. It didn't feel like darkness at all, and it's definitely for the best that we ditched it because this art style is stronger. But one of these days, you bet your ass I'm going to do something abstract.
I can't wait till all your old prototypes end up on eBay.
I mean, I don't think I'm going to keep them around long enough for that raw character. They're taking up way too much space in my basement right now.
So I just noticed that one of the stretch goals that were met was the custom soundtrack. Now, are you guys collaborating equally on that, or?
Kind of.
Man.
So, yeah.
Actually,
so it is not
this way on my screen.
It is not a stretch goal. The soundtrack is part of the what used to be the All-In pledge, but again, demand has created a much more elaborate experience for people who really wanted it, and we've been blown away by that. But the soundtrack is part of what used to be our All-In pledge, which includes LED candles that every player gets, and the soundtrack. So the idea would be that if you want to create the full experience, you turn the lights off, you turn these little candles on, and then you have the soundtrack playing through the darkness while you're playing. So if you really want that experience, we have a package that just does that. I'm really excited to see how it is. I haven't had the candles yet, but I'm going to play it that way, I think, for sure.
The soundtrack is just Chris talking about laser cut. For 45 minutes. Slowly go mad as you play the game.
But the soundtrack being done, we actually we're working closely with composers that are friends and fans of the game, and I'm super excited for it. I'm working closely with them. That's kind of one of my role right now is taking care of that, and I'll have more information hopefully for that. But it's a process. It's all going to be original music. It's not going to be like a mixtape we put in the bag. It's going to be a thing we designed to fit this. And hopefully go along with the way the game feels while you're playing it.